Hi, Dad. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me again.
Why are vegans one of the most hated groups on the planet?
It's interesting because once you've made a choice to no longer abuse animals or take part in a violent and deeply unpleasant activity, you would think that the vast majority of people would see that as a positive thing. However, vegans seem to be more vilified, or perhaps not quite as vilified as paedophiles and serial killers, but to say you're a vegan in polite society is something that a lot of vegans are ashamed of, because one, you don't want to cause a fight or make people feel awkward, but ultimately all you're trying to do is minimize the amount of cruelty that exists on this planet. And it is incredible how I guess I'm part of that nebulous community, are disliked for it. But you yourself have been out on the streets, whereas I haven't. So you know yourself, you've come face to face with more of the animosity than I have.
Yeah, it's always a mixed bag when you talk to people. Some people are glad that you've opened their eyes to what happens to animals, and some resent you for it, or want to justify their current lifestyle and don't want to change. And because basically what you're doing is, what we do in the activism is show slaughterhouse footage to people as they're walking along the street, and people can just walk by. Most people just walk by. They might look at it briefly to see what's going on, but then just keep walking. There's a lot of shocked reactions, but then there are a few people who come and actually look closer at what's going on. And then those are the people we talk to, because you'd think, okay, those people who actually have stopped what they're doing to have a look, they're going to be a bit more receptive to what we're doing here. But you can get some really kind of toxic characters. There was one woman I chatted to who I said to her, "Are you a compassionate person?" I asked that question. And she said, "Yeah, of course I am." It's like, well, every time I ask that question, people just think, yeah, of course I am. They almost get kind of affronted by that. And we've in the same question, if I ask if you're an animal lover, they're like, yes, of course. Like, that's just an absolute no-brainer. I like animals. I love animals. Saying I don't love animals or saying I'm not a compassionate person would, be very strange. So then the next question I ask is, okay, but you eat chickens or cows and pigs. How can you be compassionate if you're paying for animals to be sent to a slaughterhouse? And then that's when they either make the connection or they get angry. And with this specific woman, she got really angry. She said, you don't know me at all. You don't know me. Why are you saying this? I don't harm these chickens. I just buy chicken. I'm a compassionate person. You can't say that to me. She was getting really, really, really angry. And I think, I guess the way I do activism maybe is a bit strong, because I'm just kind of very direct. Like, okay, you say you're a compassionate person, but you pay for chickens to be slaughtered. Therefore, you're not a compassionate person because you're paying for animals to have their throats slit. And then they're like, but I'm not actually doing it. But then I say, okay, so I'm going to pay somebody to slit a dog's throat. Is that animal abuse? And they'll say, yeah, of course, but it's different. I'm like, no, it's the same thing. You're paying for a chicken to have its throat slit, or you're paying for a pig to be thrown into a gas chamber, because these products would not be in the supermarket if you weren't paying for them. And I usually ask, if the world was fully vegan, why would there be slaughterhouses?
It's an incredible cognitive dissonance, isn't it, that you think that you can eat a Big Mac or a chicken fricassee but not have any responsibility for
What's
that.
a chicken fricassee?
I don't know, some chicken stew kind of thing. But whatever or a bacon sandwich, that you can eat that and have no responsibility whatsoever for the suffering that has occurred in order to get that into your mouth. And I personally think that the defensiveness and the antagonism that just even mentioning the word vegan causes in people is because somewhere deep down, everybody knows that and feels a slight bit of shame and anxiety about it. I know for a fact when I was a carnivore, which was on and off, well, I was a vegan about 8 years ago, but before that I'd been a vegetarian, but I'd been a pescatarian, and I'd fallen off the vegetarian bandwagon a number of times. I had always had that sort of sense of guilt, and I think a lot of meat eaters do. Because you can say that, well, I hear some vegans say you're either, ignorant or cruel or both if you're a carnivore, and I kind of think as time goes on, ignorance is less and less of an excuse. So therefore, anybody who comes out defensively or immediately attacks you if you're in a social situation and they find out you're a vegan, they might attack you in a kind of polite way, but they're still really being defensive, is because underneath it, at some level, they know that they're doing something which is cruel and which, as Ricky Gervais said, you're either compassionate to animals, you include animals within your sphere of compassion, or you're not a compassionate person. And there's nobody on this planet who would say, I'm not a compassionate person, I'm not a kind person. And there's nobody that would say, I don't like animals. 100% of people love animals, and yet 99% of people eat them. Now, that is the biggest insanity, the biggest level of cognitive dissonance that, there can possibly be. And yet you're prodding that cognitive dissonance every time you either mention you're a vegan, which is a challenge, I guess. Just even saying I'm a vegan is challenging people, even if you don't want to talk about it. They still feel challenged and triggered. And of course, it's madness. It's total madness. And I think a lot of people who eat, or even vegetarians, anyone who contributes to animal cruelty, which is all animal agriculture, whether it's organic or factory farming, you're contributing to cruelty. And I think everyone knows. And that's why there is a sort of defensive, sometimes very aggressive reaction.
Yeah, it's because I went vegan when I think I was like 15, 16. But when people have been non-vegan for so long, for years upon years upon years, they identify with that lifestyle. So then you think there's a correlation between age and rigidness about your diet, because you're maybe a bit more open when you're young. But I'm always challenged on that idea when I talk to people. I talk to older people who are really open and are going vegan, just go vegan when I chat to them. Then I talk to young people who are really, really set in stone and won't change at all and get really aggressive. I talked to these two teenage girls who, I guess they were kind of trolling me. They were just like laughing and not really taking what I was saying seriously. But I'm just like, wow, you really have no heart at all. You just that is your mechanism. Your defense mechanism is to laugh and to make fun of this because it's wrong. This is, I'm confronting you with something really serious when you're just kind of doing some shopping in Glasgow, and I'm confronting you with something really, really serious, and your only mechanism is to laugh and troll. But then I talked to some older people who thanked me for opening their eyes to it and wanted to, the amount of times I got people to write down this documentary name into their notes app was great. Land of Hope and Glory, which is the UK factory farm footage, kind of recent footage. So I don't know if it's an age thing, because you get young people who are really closed and just laugh and joke, and you get older people who are a bit more open. And especially when I've done some activism events in York, all the people around me were older, and that was a bit of a surprise because I thought, wouldn't it be younger people doing activism?
Well, I think you're either a person that's prepared to make changes which for the benefit of not just yourself, but the wider community. And I think you're either that kind of person, whatever age you are.
It doesn't matter about age.
Yeah, and I think that people, you go, if you get to 60 or 70, just from a very cursory reading of the facts that in terms of, despite what Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, the bullshit that comes out of their mouths about the fact that veganism actually increases carbon emissions. We know just from the stake of environmental degradation that animal agriculture contributes to whatever it is. I don't have the facts in front of me, but it's an enormous. It's the biggest contribution.
More than transportation.
Yeah. So just from that on itself, even if you say I don't like animals, well, do you love your children and your grandchildren? Do you want them to live in a world that's sustainable? You can not care about animals, but surely you care about your family and the people you love. And then there's that element of it. And then there's the fact that we've recently come out of a pandemic the global pandemic, and we know for a fact that there will be other pandemics that are largely caused by animals being housed in appalling conditions, and then these viruses will spread and break out and then transfer to the human population. So there's that reason,
and also antibiotic resistance.
all of this stuff. You can hate animals, you can have no compassion for animals whatsoever, and even if you're a total sort of dyed in the wool, humanity is neat, humanity rules, animals are here just to serve us, even if you're one of that unfortunate type of people, then giving up eating animals is still the way forward. Because if you presumably care about your future of humanity, then you've got to do it anyway.
But then that person would, I think there's a reason why we in activism, it's ethics and environment and health can be like things you talk about on the side, but ethics is the main thing, because you could imagine a local local environmentally friendly like chicken farm or something, like eggs or chickens or pigs, like just just your local round the corner, very environmentally friendly, that really doesn't have much of an impact because it's all locally sourced animals and animal feed. And then that person would come back at you and say, well, I guess I understand about factory farms, like that is ridiculous environmental damage, but I've got some local butchers and it's all very environmentally friendly.
You still concentrate on the fact that they would maintain the fact that these animals have a great life before they're brutally slaughtered.
I mean, the amount of people who always say, "Oh, but the meat I get is not like that." I go to local. It's like almost every person has their own special ethical supplier. But then I ask, "Oh, how do they kill them?" And they actually don't. They just kind of make it up. They actually don't know. They just kind of take it that what they buy is ethical.
Don't know, and they certainly wouldn't want to see it. These people that are squeamish when they watch David Attenborough documentaries. Oh, I can't bear to look at animals being treated cruelly. I'm so tender-hearted. I love animals, but while they're eating a bacon sandwich, at the same time, without just the sort of level of disconnect between the animal cruelty and what you're doing. I don't know how you do it. I'd be sort of tearing my hair out just talking to these people. It would drive me nuts.
I find it interesting when people say, when I ask them what would be a humane way of killing, and they say, oh, well, you let the animal have a nice long life, and then either they die naturally. A lot of people say, oh, they just die and we just eat them.
Well, that never happens.
That never happens. Or we just kill them really, really quickly and painlessly. And I'm like, okay, explain what would that be? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, chop their head off or slit their throat. So I said, okay, if we just imagine this kind of like your dream scenario of humane slaughter, it still doesn't fit the definition of humane, because humane means compassionate. And how is it compassionate to let an animal live a long life? The word "let," like you're giving them permission. You can live a long life, and then I kill you quickly and eat you. It's like if I had a dog and I killed and ate that dog when he was old, I think the RSPCA would have a problem with that. I think everyone would have a problem with that, because there's no, as a dog owner, you don't have a right to kill your dog in this country. There's no law that says you can kill your dog. Law against that's what I mean. Yeah, well, it's illegal to kill your dog. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, if you're allowed to kill a cow or a sheep, you should be allowed to kill any animal that you want and just eat it or skin it and use its skin for your shoes or your belt or your purse. There shouldn't be a law. You're either an animal abuser or you're not. It doesn't matter what species it is. It's that argument I had with my father. He's keen on the whale. Save the whales, Greenpeace, all that. I asked him what's the difference between a cow and a whale, and he said, well, the cows I eat cows because they're farmed in order to be eaten. I said, but for that individual cow and that individual whale, they're actually pretty closely related in terms of looking at an evolution perspective. He said, well, cows are farmed to be eaten. I said, well, if you got a section of the Atlantic Ocean and farmed loads of blue whales specifically for them to be eaten, that would then make eating the whales perfectly all right. Well, why pick on the Faroe Islands and all these people that eat whales? How are they more brutal or barbaric than anybody who eats a Big Mac or a sirloin steak? Of course, you can't answer it because Then it was, whales are far more intelligent than cows. So again, we grade people's or creatures' intelligence, and then we decide whether they're worthy to live or die depending on their IQ or their supposed IQ. It's so preposterous.
You just kind of ask, okay, so intelligence is the factor for worth of life,
And we decide.
Really?
We're here and we can decide. And obviously that goes down to, well, you can decide whether a human being who's mentally challenged is clearly less fit to be alive than one that is, winning mastermind.
Obviously, we would all be against that idea, but why can't we use that same metric for non-human animals? We say, oh, they're less intelligent, or they're different to us, they look different.
Yeah, and then you hear the argument, oh, well, if it wasn't for us animal eaters, when you go walking out in the hills, you never see a sheep or a cow. So
I couldn't believe when I heard that argument the first time.
Therefore, well, I'd rather not see a sheep and a cow. I'd rather just see the countryside rather than having these enslaved creatures. It's like saying, well, if we didn't have, if you want to see Jewish people, a Nazi might say, if you want to see some Jewish people, then you have to see them in our camp. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any. You're still housing these creatures to be slaughtered in the end for your own benefit. I mean, every argument against veganism is preposterous in my view. I haven't yet heard one that isn't very easily unpicked.
Well, I do find it very interesting how there are arguments against veganism. That was a bit confusing for me at the time when I first went vegan, because I just saw the documentary Earthlings, saw the footage, and thought, okay, that's what I'm contributing.
Well, how anyone could watch that documentary and not go vegan?
There's
is
something
incredible.
wrong with them. But yeah, I watched the documentary, saw the footage. All right, that's wrong. I'm contributing to that. I'm going to go vegan. Is it healthy? I assume so. Is it environmentally friendly? I assume so. Do plants feel pain? No. I didn't have to think about all that crap. I just went vegan. I just saw the footage and was like, okay, vegan. So then when I started having conversations with people, and then all these obstacles came up, and even after showing the footage, all these obstacles came up, all these excuses. It just felt like, what universe are we living in? That you know that what you're doing is cruel. You've seen the victims, but you still have problems with going vegan. You still have obstacles. You maybe don't even think it's cruel. Like, there are people who see Earthlings or see this footage and actually would argue it's not cruel.
Well, I was part of that myself, because I only went vegan. Just around the time you did. I was 50 when I went vegan, or nearly 50. And I remember we had chickens, and I got the chickens because I thought it'd be nice for my kids to have chickens and, collect their eggs and all that kind of good life stuff. And there was one point you were very fond of the chickens, but your favorite food was chicken drumsticks, wasn't it? I mean, that was I'd fallen off the vegetarian bandwagon at that point, and I was eating animals. And I think you just sort of said, hold on, why am I eating? You've just been talking about playing with the chickens in their enclosure, and then you were eating chicken. And I think we all had a moment where we thought, oh, this is madness.
But what did we just put it under the carpet? That what I said. Like,
I think we kind of
like these little seeds of.
Where we just made these kind of accommodations or compromises with the sort of ethics of it. We all continually did it,
Just to continue the lifestyle.
Yeah, I was guilty of it, and then it came to think, Christ, this thing I did for my kids, thinking it would be lovely to have chickens, and maybe that's cruel. Keeping, I mean, they have plenty of room to roam around, and maybe and these chickens don't want their eggs removed from them, and that had taken me a long time to realise, hold on a minute, I think I'm doing something nice and it's pleasurable and making people happy, but actually
at the end of the day, you're stealing eggs from chickens.
Am I being actually cruel to these creatures? And I wouldn't do it again. But it took me a long time, and I became a vegetarian when I was in my early 20s, and then I was a vegetarian for a long time, and then I kind of fell off because I think I just generally got bored explaining myself, and I didn't even know what a vegan was. I just ate cheese and eggs and drank milk. Well, I no idea that those industries that produce those goods are as cruel as hanging a cow up by its hooves and putting electricity through its body. The stealing their children from them, and their babies from them, and everything about even just being a vegetarian is cruel. But I mean, it took me a long time, to 50, to actually sort of for the scales to fall from my eyes to realize it's all of it is incredibly cruel, and I don't want to be part of something that is so ostensibly and obviously cruel. And that should therefore bring down hatred and vitriol upon my head from the wider public, which it does.
Well, I just want to add
the comments below will probably just say you'll probably get more abuse than the comments.
Well, yeah. So my channel used to be vegan stuff, and it's now been philosophy and mindfulness and stoicism. So this is a kind of return to that era, and I did get a lot of abuse. So yeah, that's gonna be exciting.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say about the backyard hens thing, because we talk quite quickly, but there's some extra detail about that. Why is it cruel? Well, when you steal an egg from a chicken, they don't know it's not a child, a baby. They don't know it's a period. So that's quite traumatic for a chicken, for you to take their egg. And also, it's very physically exhausting to lay an egg. And the nutrition deficit that happens when you lay an egg, a lot of nutrients go into making an egg. So a lot of calcium from the chicken.
So it's robbed from their bones.
It's robbed from their bones when they're creating this egg. So actually, naturally, they would eat the egg after, like,
if it wasn't fertilized.
If it wasn't, they would just eat it up and get the nutrients back. So you're actually making the chickens weaker and weaker because you're taking away the sustenance of these eggs.
And these chickens are bred to lay way more eggs.
Exactly, and that's another point. They're bred to lay way more eggs than they're supposed to. And every time you take away an egg, they replace it. So you're forcing them psychologically to lay way more eggs, and that's exhausting. And yeah, it's just that alone. A backyard hens, which is cruel in itself, which is the kind of the least cruel option. Think about factory farmed chickens in cages. There's a myth about free range, that chickens are just on pastures and just pecking away in this lovely, beautiful meadow, and farmers come and just pick some eggs and put a little, it's all very romanticized. You might get that idea from like movies and TV shows and stuff, like a romanticized free range chicken farm. But actually, they're in this large warehouse, very crowded together, and they only have like 20 to 30 minutes outside a day. But then they're put back into this massive chamber, warehouse, very cramped up, walking on their own feces, pissing and urinating on each other, getting really terrified, pecking at each other because they're so crowded. Got no light.
So it doesn't take much to get the free range label on your
eggs.
Eggs.
There's just someone comes along and just, okay, let's see if they get a bit of time outside.
They can turn around.
Exactly. They can turn around. They can go outside for a little bit. Okay, good. That's free range. They're happy hens now.
Yeah. Get the smiling chicken on the egg box.
And that was the conversation I had with people. Was like, yeah, it was like they were like, oh, I imagine it to be much nicer than this. Like, this was the picture I had in my head. Because these are the pictures that you're fed. I remember when I went to Waitrose recently, and this massive poster of a pig in a field, and that's it. And that was just pork, British pork, just a pig in a field. That is, you couldn't get further away from the reality.
Well, even in our local town, isn't there? All your life, and since you've moved, there's a hog roast every sort of Saturday. There's a hog roast van, and it's got a pig turning around on a spit. And then above it is a picture of a pig
with a knife
in a
and
chef's
fork.
hat. The pig's got a really smiley face, and he's holding a knife and fork, and he's grinning underneath the pig's snout. And you think you're selling while we can see the actual pig spinning around with its head off on a spit. You're actually selling it with a cartoon pig that's holding a knife and fork. What is the pig supposedly going to be eating himself whilst grinning inanely at you? I mean, the whole madness of it.
That's enough to get people to think, yeah, it's all good.
From childhood onwards, that's drip fed into us. So I myself, I'm not pointing the finger at. I myself was indoctrinated by this idea that animals like to be killed and eaten by
us. Is that what you believe? They
haven't got a problem with it. It's and you justify it to yourself, don't you? I would go walking around and I'd see a cow when I was eating cows, and I'd sort of pat it on the head. And I think, what a beautiful creature. And I'd walk away and go, oh, I'm a hypocrite for even looking at that cow in the face, because I'll probably go home and have a steak tonight. And but I justify, well, the cow's having a good life. The sun's shining. It's got a green field. It may have a number on its rump, but it's still an open space, and it's got its calves by its side, and I justify it to myself.
You just don't think to the point of when they get killed. You think about all of the what before then.
Well, you don't think of them having their babies taken away from them, or
the whole process.
Yeah, the whole thing.
You can easily get disillusioned with what goes on by just looking at cows and pigs in fields and think, okay, this seems pretty nice.
Franz Kafka, the novelist, famously, he used to love going to the zoo in Prague, I think it was, and he stopped eating animals. He says, because I like looking at the fish, and I want to be able to look at the fish in the eye through the tank. Although you could argue that even going to an aquarium or a zoo is not vegan.
But I understand the point.
But he just wanted to. It's wanting to sort of look at your sentient beings as if you're. The phrase earthlings is excellent, isn't it? Because we are all earthlings. We're all of us, whatever species we are. We shunted onto this planet without choosing to be here. And the very least we should be able to do is be kind towards each other. And it doesn't matter whether you're a dog or a human or a chicken or even a fly. And I, you encouraged us for this. We in the summer, the flies, pain in the arse, blue bottles come into the house, get the spray out, spray the blue bottles, watch them go zzz, and then sort of end up sort of smacking their heads against the wall, and then do break dancing on the floor and clearly dying horribly because you've just poisoned them. Or open a window
and they fly away
and accept that blue bottles are a bit annoying and they crap on your food, but cover your food, open a window, and you can actually usher them out with
instead of poisoning them.
You're not only causing a sentient-ish creature a horrible death, but you're also not filling your own house with poison, and life is so much easier when
there's no sentient-ish.
Okay.
Sentient.
Okay, it's sentient. It's sentient, and it doesn't want to be poisoned and have a horrible death.
Well, I do have a very vivid memory of watching a fly just like bashing against the wall because it was having poison, and just goes.
Yeah, we used to do it. We used to just without thinking, just.
And the smell is awful of the spray.
And I think just for once, we go back to why I personally became a vegetarian back in my 20s is because I was unhappy. That was the first. I was unhappy, and it wasn't even to do with watching documentaries. I just wanted to be a peaceful person. I realised I can only be a peaceful person, and what you put into your mouth. That's linked. You can't sort of sit there meditating and try to be peaceful, and if you're contributing to an industry which is horrific and barbaric and totally non-peaceful.
So every mindfulness teacher who's not a vegan needs to take a hard look at themselves.
Well, I don't understand. We're trying to create a more peaceful world. Maybe it's pie in the sky. Maybe you can't do it. But I think that just from a very first starting point, what you eat 3 times a day has got to be hugely important. And you can't. When I gave up eating animals, although I was a vegetarian, I felt a lot better about myself, and that made me feel more peaceful. Obviously, I didn't realise, but I had a long way to go in order to sort of be. So I didn't realise how brutal the dairy industry is. But I just think in terms of feeling better about yourself, even if you forget about the animals, just feeling better about yourself and your existence on this planet, it made a big difference to me, knowing that I had reduced my contribution towards something that is horrific, absolutely horrific.
So yeah, if you it's interesting you say feel better about yourself is the reason to go vegan.
Well, for me initially,
yeah.
And then obviously you're actually, well, because that it's cruel. I mean, I don't buy the argument that people I think everyone knows it's cruel. I mean, they just put their head in the sand about it. It's like when people, someone, I'm a vegetarian. I'm only eating meat once a week now. I only eat it once a week. And as we've said, it's like saying, I do beat my girlfriend up. I used to beat her up every night. Now I only beat her up once a week. So therefore, I'm on a journey towards not being a violent person.
The amount of people, I mean, it amazed me, the amount of people who say to me on Saturday when I was doing activism, saying to me, I don't really eat much meat, or I've been cutting down, or I don't really drink milk. It's like, I don't drink, it's like, okay, so what do you eat? What animal products do you eat? Because I don't know they're trying to justify that they actually are pretty vegan already, because they know it's wrong. Obviously, they wouldn't be like that. They want you to think they're a good person straight away.
Everybody wants to be thought of as a good person.
Yeah.
It is like saying, okay, 10 years ago I was a serial killer. I used to go out. I used to shoot, strangle women. I did 18, 19. I used to do that every year, so up to 10 years ago. And now I just shoot. It's the occasional one every so often. I mean, ethically, it is that kind of weird parallel that they draw, because you're either cruel or you're not cruel. It doesn't mean to say that all vegans can't be 100% pure. It's impossible to not, just by being alive, we inadvertently harm things. But I guess that inadvertent is an important word.
Yeah, when someone was saying, "Oh, but you step on ants." Well, that's unintentional killing, but you know that you're going to be killing these pigs, cows, and chickens with your purchases.
But it's so difficult. It's like, we know that electricity, or they put animal products in electricity. They put
money as well.
They put they put it in money. Put it in if you ever use an internal combustion engine, unless it's run on chip fat, there's going to be probably going to be animal products in there. And then of course you've got the petrol you're using. So people say, you drive a car.
Yeah.
I've had that. You drive a car. I've had someone, when I was discussing it, you've got a phone. So therefore I can't use a phone and claim to be a vegan, because there's some tenuous link between the exploitation that the lithium batteries are extracted from peasants who are treated badly in Afghanistan, where the lithium mines are. I don't know. So therefore, you can't possibly take a moral position about anything.
I mean, it is true that like an iPhone or a Samsung phone are very unethical products if you really do some hard research into them. And vegans aren't exempt from thinking about these issues, and like thinking about buying from secondhand shops instead of buying from Primark and Next, because of the workers' conditions and wages, and maybe getting more ethical phones. These are all things that are worth,
of course,
thinking about and picking up on, but they don't stop that person from being responsible for being
very least
vegan.
I think it's the very least we can be as a vegan.
Yeah, it's the starting point,
and then try and phase out Amazon and Apple, and never go anywhere, just walk
take
everywhere.
Transport.
All these things are important, but it's the one thing that all of us could do that is actually very simple. And then we were talking about misconceptions of veganism, like it's some kind of ascetic, joyless lifestyle, that the food is. A lot of people say, "Oh, I can't be vegan because it's what am I going to eat?" But the vegan food is great. I mean, you're not missing out on anything if you're a vegan. It just takes a decent cookbook or a bit of imagination. It's incredible.
So, how have you found your cooking change from going vegan?
Well, you realise that one, you're not feeling slightly bad about chopping up something's flesh and getting your hands
and food poisoning as well. The risk of food poisoning.
Yeah, but I like cooking and done it all my life. And food is infinitely nicer. It's much more of a pleasure to cook something that has no death attached to it. And as we know, nearly all meats, they taste how they taste because they're flavored or marinated in plants or fruit or something else. I mean, a piece of raw meat on its own doesn't taste of much. I mean, fish is a foul tasting meat.
Well,
Yeah.
I bet
Generally.
for a fact that if you're driving along the road and you see roadkill, you don't start salivating, do you?
No.
You think it looks disgusting.
Mm.
But, if you seasoned that roadkill up and cooked it and whatever, it might taste okay.
Yeah.
Because, it's... the plants make it taste nice.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
You get a piece of a chicken breast and you stick it in the oven without anything, without salt or pepper or any kind of yogurt or marinade. It doesn't taste of anything. It's like what's the thought experiment of you put a kid in a room with a banana and a piglet. It's not going to start salivating over the piglet.
It's going to stroke and cuddle the piglet while eating the carrot.
It's going to kiss the piglet and eat the banana or the carrot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that in itself shows the moral dissonance when as kids you're all brought up with Peppa Pig and all the creatures
all
on your
farm animals.
all farm animals, and you kiss and cuddle and love the farm animals, and then
we have toys that are farm animals.
And then you eat them, and then kids are just eating these animals in the evening through. Then that's why they sort of when more enlightened children get to be teenagers, they go, hold on a second, hold on a minute, what's going on here? How come I've got a dog here and a cat here and a dead pig here?
It's speciesism, and all forms of discrimination, all of the horrific things that have happened in the world throughout history. It's all about othering someone.
Exactly.
And if we need to get non-human animals right, I think there's one quote. I'm not sure if you tell me who said this. That like the ethics of a society can be based on how they treat their non-human animals. Like if you had to think about like how
is it Shaw, George Bernard Shaw?
Maybe.
I'm not sure.
But I think that really is true. That we can have women's rights, Black lives, equal for black and white, man and woman, all of that kind of stuff, human rights, all sorted. But if we're still like throwing pigs into gas chambers, we have no moral backbone at all. And
animals are like children, aren't they? They're intelligent children. You see it all the time. That YouTube now proliferates with the videos of very cute pigs, and chickens and turkeys and rats. That if you're actually nice to them and cuddle them, they'll come to you and show you love and affection. No,
exactly.
Every living thing wants, even a snake, or a lizard. These things are open to affection and being treated kindly.
That's why it's crazy when people say, "How do you know that these animals don't want to be killed and eaten?" They don't, or they don't know about it.
Or they have no sense of the future whatsoever.
Yeah, they don't know what's going to happen. It's like, have you got a pet? You must. You probably have way more knowledge about animals because you've got a pet, and you know if they are feeling down or if they're feeling happy, or you can understand that. You understand that animals have emotions and feelings.
And the nonsense of it, as we go back to what we were starting earlier. Well, I give the animal's got a lovely life, and it's out in the open. It's doing all the things. It gets to sort of hang out with its fellow creatures, and then painlessly, when it's not looking, we put a bolt through its head and eat it in a second. It never knew what happened. Well, you can then equate that to human beings. Then, if you kill something quickly and painlessly, so called, then that makes it all right. You're in a moral minefield if you're going down that pathway. It's incredible.
Yeah, people can really say some horrific things when they're trying to justify their eating habits. Their eating habit, they can change it, and it's so easily.
The point is, it's unnecessary. It's totally It's cruelty, which is unnecessary.
Well, that's the biggest catchword.
Yeah,
unnecessary.
The plant food is fantastic, and I get where do you get your protein from? Where do you get your protein from? Because
where do the pigs get their protein
from? The same
from?
place that the animal that you eat got its protein. We're just cutting out the middleman and the cruelty and go straight to the protein. It's like it's not. Eating animal flesh is not the only place you can get protein. All vegetables have protein, and beans have loads of protein. There's nuts. There's loads of things, and it's so unnecessary. I take my hat off to you and your activist friends because I would just get exasperated. I'm getting exasperated now by just having imaginary conversation or recalling ones I've had just socially, and I just feel like getting up and walking out the pub, and I can't be bothered with it.
You do have those conversations, but you also have ones where you that final push for someone to go vegan. That feels really good.
Yeah.
So it's you take the good and the bad, and also you just.
Well, I was sitting in a friend's house once, and I was in the kitchen. We were a bit drunk, and his wife was away, so he hadn't washed up, and he's a keen cook. And there was a sort of carcass of a sort of big goose or something, just its ribs sticking out of a pot. There were like spare ribs. It was like a with nil and eye kitchen, but it had actually food in it, and there was like spare ribs. There was bones everywhere from 3 or 4 days cooking. And then he had his dog, and he was saying, how much he actually said, and he was playing with the dog. He said, nobody's a bigger animal lover than me, or something. And I had enough to drink that I just didn't let it go. And I said, to be honest, that's pretty laughable when we're in a sort of animal graveyard here. I mean, it's just like, it was like an abattoir, his kitchen. And then he didn't, I'd say he took sort of benign offense to it, that I was saying that he was being a hypocrite for being an animal lover but he could not make the connection between the fact that he had all these dead animals all around him, and he had a sort of very cute dog yapping at his heels. He could not see why he needed to be accused, why he could not make the statement, I'm the greatest animal lover in the Western world. And the argument sort of escalated into, it got quite heated. But because you just, if you can't make somebody see that bare fact, plain fact, but people don't want to. It's amazing what the human mind can do when it's in denial of what is so obvious to anybody else.
I think the interesting. Before we did the activism on Saturday, we were doing like a briefing at the beginning, and one of the activists said 3 excuses and then leave and stop the conversation. And that was really new to me, because I've had conversations where we've just gone through all the excuses, like hundreds of them, and you just keep going and going and going. And when he said 3 excuses, I was like, really? That's so few. And I think it's the idea that if someone sees the footage and is willing to just give you 3 excuses, around about 3 excuses, then they're not wanting to change. They just want to have an argument.
They just want to have a little.
They just want to jab at you,
little fight.
I do think that maybe 3 is a bit too few, because I converted someone, my friend who I made go vegan. We went for every excuse, and then he went vegan. He saw the footage. We went for every single excuse, and only at that point did he go vegan.
But there was obviously a seed in him already. I mean, you're only going to help push someone over the line who's already made that. He's already
been going down that road.
But I mean, I can't understand if you look at any footage of any kind of slaughterhouse or abattoir, or even the documentary Earthlings, which should be required viewing in schools. I think. I mean, that would convert generations of people towards veganism. You only have to look at.
It's the one graphic film kids should watch.
Yeah, you if you can get through that and you carry on eating animals, then you must be a psychopath.
Well, that's what one YouTuber has done lots of videos on vegan activism. He's called the Vegan Foot Soldier, and he recently privated all his videos, and he released one video, and it was just text. It was like a letter, and he said, I've been trying to get people to go vegan for so long, and I've come to this conclusion that if you see the footage and don't go vegan, then you're unreachable. You don't care, so there's no point having debates with you. You just won't go vegan, which is quite a strong idea, because that would basically stop us. Then there's no point us talking to people when they're looking at the footage. Apart from, you go up to someone and you say, "Oh, what do you think of the footage? Wow, it's awful. I probably should go vegan." Yeah, you should. Great. Bye.
There's got to be a little. There's always a flame of compassion within their heart.
You've got to find that
you blow on.
You've got to you've got to see that, and it's so obvious when you talk to people who aren't really looking at you. Like one person was just like not looking at me when he was talking to me, and he was just going for excuses. And I think the only time I got him riled up was when I called him an animal abuser. He said, "Oh, I'm an animal lover," and I said, "No, you're an animal abuser because you're doing this." And that's when he kind of started to look at me, and he was starting to kind of engage.
Or he's getting ready to punch you on the nose.
Maybe no, he didn't seem that aggressive. But yeah, there are people you talk to who it is time to stop chatting to them, because they just want to have an argument, a discussion. They just want to have a little. They like the chats, they like the debate, but they actually don't want to change.
Well, that's why I take my hat off to you guys, and then like the Earthling Ed and Joey Carbstrong and all those guys, because how they keep it together with some of the nonsense that I've seen them here. I mean, I find it difficult to watch their interviews because I just find the people they're talking to so exasperating.
That's what I think. That's the difference between Earthling Ed and Joey Carbstrong. So I think Earthling Ed is more willing to entertain people's craziness and have a long debate with them. But then you take Joey, who has been in slaughterhouses. I don't think Ed has really done that as much.
So he gets much more upset.
He gets more upset and more passionate because he's actually like put cameras in the gas chambers, and he's way more of a like a kind of classical activist of like trying to uncover footage, trying to show the footage. Yeah, he takes it personally because he's actually probably been there. So when he talks to people who just say the same excuses, there was one video where this guy who was just giving some excuses, and Joey was just getting so exasperated he just couldn't. He wasn't going to entertain them.
Well, he gets. Yeah, I mean,
he wasn't going to entertain
them. And I haven't even been inside them, so I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised he doesn't blow up a gasket.
So yeah, Joey just blew up, and he was just like, "You're an animal abuser. You shouldn't be allowed to express these views in public." And he was just getting very exasperated.
But the trouble with that documentary made, what was it called?
Pignorant.
Pignorant. I circulated it amongst people I know, all of whom eat animals, and I know that none of them will have watched it. Because like a friend of mine said, I'm not going to read that book. I'm not going to watch that documentary because I like eating animals, and this is going to make me feel bad about it. And that's what. At least he was honest. But it was like, I'm not going to. I know that you're right, but I'm not going to watch any of this or read it.
But would he admit that he's a cruel person?
No, he wouldn't.
It's okay that he hasn't fully been honest.
No, he's not being fully honest.
He needs to stand in front of everybody and say, I am happy to be an animal abuser. I'm a conscious animal abuser. I'm a conscious cruel person. That's what I try to get people to admit. Even if they're not going to go vegan, at least you need to know that what.
Yes, and when I remember when I did eat animals, I can remember I always had that. I knew that this was. I knew I was participating in something cruel. So I used to love chicken tikka in Indian restaurants, and that was the one thing when I went vegetarian before I became vegan. I used to sit there and really be envious in an Indian restaurant when it would come out all sort of on the hot plate and making all that great noise. And then I relented and fell off the wagon. I mean, it's about 10, 15 years ago. I'd always feel I never enjoyed it because I knew I was being cruel.
That's the thing, because you say fell off the wagon. So you weren't really a vegetarian.
Well, no, I hadn't really gone the full. I hadn't really. Well,
because vegetarian is meaningless. That's the
yeah.
So that's why you can easily fall off the wagon. Because it doesn't mean anything.
That's exactly because it's neither one thing or the other. It's a sort of step in the right direction, but it's yeah. So I wasn't. The penny hadn't properly dropped about animal abuse until I became a vegan when I was 50. I was beating up my wife once a week, not every week, every day.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because
don't take that little snip out of context and make a short of it because I might get into trouble.
Well, we're talking about vegetarians. There are some vegetarians, like the one I talked to on Saturday, I've been vegetarian for 10 years, and I've been kind of thinking a little bit about veganism, but watching this footage, talking to you, that's what's made me want to go. Because I asked her, I'll talk to me.
So it was worth the trip to Glasgow just for that one person?
That first person I talked to was really a great conversation. But then I was talking to another activist, and they were saying, I was talking to this vegetarian, and you would not think this person was vegetarian the way they were talking to me. They really wanted to justify this animal abuse. And, you'd think, again, with the age thing, that if you're vegetarian, that you'd be more susceptible to veganism. But actually, you might be even more unwilling to change because you're so conditioned with vegetarianism that you're stuck.
So vegans are even more disliked by vegetarians than by fully fledged.
I can see an argument for that, because a vegetarian who thinks that they've been doing the right thing for so long, a vegan comes along and says you haven't. what a crazy like revelation. He's like, you think you're being a good person. You actually, you say, I'm a vegetarian. Yeah, I care about animals. You actually have that so identified. You'd get really aggressive.
What you
if
haven't
a vegan
really
comes
done,
along and says,
because I was one of those. I mean, I wasn't aggressive towards vegans, but I was like, I thought, I'm doing the right thing. It's like someone goes, I'm reading the Guardian. I'm reading the Guardian, and I get my news from the Guardian. I'm a liberal, I'm a good morally engaged person. But we know the Guardian is that's one for another podcast. But it's if you're a vegetarian, yeah, you can see why you might really have a go at a vegan that's saying all your sacrifices and all the things you've done for the last 20 years are in vain. Because have a look at that video that's on YouTube called "Dairy is Scary." If you're in any doubts, I can't remember the name of the woman. Erin someone.
Dairy is scary.
Yeah, I mean, have a look at that if you're in any doubts about how vegetarians are contributing to cruelty on a massive scale. Yeah.
The dairy industry is so much torture and abuse that goes on before that animal is killed. It's horrific. It's one of the worst industries.
Just seeing a mother cow that's just had a calf, and then seeing that calf being taken away from the cow, and then the cow sort of bellowing and just wailing, almost like a human cry of had that happen to a human woman and their baby. I mean, it's heartbreaking, and that's obviously the dairy industry would not be able to cope, wouldn't be able to function without babies being removed from their mothers. And you don't think about that when you're drinking a pint of milk. You don't think, hold on, this milk is constantly produced. This cow is constantly producing milk for babies that don't exist because they've all been taken away from them to be slaughtered.
And this milk it was specifically designed for a growing calf, not for a grown adult human. But I mean, when I talk, my language has changed slightly in the activism, in the conversations I have, because I ask people really obvious questions like, is it wrong to separate children from mothers? Yeah. And then when they're looking at the footage of the dairy industry, I'm like, are gas chambers wrong? Yes. So just remove the animal and just simple these things just unethical. Then you're supporting these things.
Well, just from these
very simple ideas.
Just from those two ideas, you immediately think of Auschwitz. You immediately think the most heartbreaking things of the whole, the whole Holocaust were when children are taken away from their mums or their dads and then taken away. There's the horrors of that.
There's a lot of crossover between that and what goes on with animals.
And gas chambers and almost tricking the animals into, tricking the animals to not know that they're going to their deaths. But of course they do. You only have to see some footage where you can see the cows and
the biggest thing
pigs.
is
they know that they're going to be killed. You can tell that they know.
Oh yeah, you can see them trying to turn around and escape.
Panicking.
They jump over.
Pigs are not stupid, are they? I mean, like, what did they say that a pig is the sort of
3-year-old
intelligence of an intelligent 4-year-old human?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest similarity that always crosses my mind when I see pigs and cows in fields is the number 408, 203, whatever. Because Jews in Auschwitz had these numbers.
Yeah, it's like you said, treating the thing that you're exploiting as other than you in order to exploit it.
You have to put a number on it.
In order to psychologically be able to do it, you have to think of that entity as less.
If each cow had a name like Fred, Jerry, I think there'll be some like, it's a bit strange that we're killing Fred today. Because a name it has a personality attached. It's like, Fred's got he's kind of shy and. But if you're just like 407, so it's just like
they become part of your family, and then it's much more difficult to kill them and then eat them.
That's why all the Jews were dehumanized, all wearing the same clothes and same haircut. And
if you want to go and fight a war, if you want to go and fight a war in a foreign land, the first thing you do teach your soldiers is how to look on their enemy combatants as less than human, as the Hun or as gooks or as cockroaches, or it's the same. I don't believe the humans we are naturally cruel. We have to be taught how to be
Yes,
we
exactly.
have to be brainwashed into accepting cruelty on a mass scale, and
That-
we have all been brainwashed from birth to think that eating animals, drinking milk, we all have free milk at school. It was part of the the milk marketing board strategy. You must have made a fortune, sort of getting the government to give every kid a free half bottle of milk. I think it was still going on in your day, wasn't it? But I think don't know.
It is. Yeah.
It's still going on now. I don't know, but we know that now that milk is actually doesn't fuel your calcium production. It strips away your bones from calcium. So it's actually something that we've foisted on our children for 70 years that actually doesn't do us any good, and is also, as we said, a very cruel industry at the same time. So yeah,
Is forcibly impregnating someone unethical? Yes. Is also, look, cows are being artificially inseminated. Look, you can see someone's thrusting his arm up the cow and injecting bull semen. That's obviously unethical. Then yes, it's these very simple concepts that maybe some vegans would say that's rape, but rape has a lot of kind of like a lot of human connotations. It's more than just the sexual abuse.
Yeah,
but I can see why people would use that word, because it just brings your attention to this is an unethical thing. This is awful.
When we know, for example, we've had guys around here doing building work. We make them cups of teas and coffee. We're giving them plant milk. Nobody knows the difference. There's no difference. In fact, plant milk doesn't go off in 3 days and stink your fridge out. But there's no need for it. That's what's so bizarre.
There's like 20 different alternatives.
There's absolutely no need to have to drink milk anyway.
Plant milk, so you don't need anything.
Yeah, and people say, well, show me a good vegan cheese. I mean, I used to be a big before I went vegan. I was a massive cheese and wine person. It's been proven that the chemical coalescence of the whatever chemical it is in dairy cheese and red wine gives you a kind of big serotonin or boost. So that's why people like cheese and wine. And I thought, well, I'll never be able to give up cheese, but there's plenty of good vegan cheeses around.
Give some examples.
Cathedral City.
Okay.
Go for Cathedral City vegan cheese. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. You may not get the same kind of serotonin hit whilst drinking a bottle of red wine, but most red wines aren't vegan anyway, so they're out. So I mean, you don't need any of this stuff. And anyway, why would you put just a little bit of pleasure above? Why would you prioritize your own pleasure above the life of a sentient creature? That's got to take away the pleasure in doing anything, surely. Well,
yeah, exactly.
Did for me anyway.
Well, so many people say I just like meat. That's the biggest question I ask people is your taste more important than their life? I ask that to almost everybody, because that's the excuse people give is, I just enjoy it. I like meat. I like my meat.
I enjoy beating my wife. We go to the same analogy, but I just enjoy beating my wife up. So, who are you to tell me I can't do it?
How much? Because you said, people know it's cruel, but how much sympathy can we have with people who aren't vegan today? Because you need a bit of sympathy and a bit of compassion, because you weren't vegan,
exactly,
and I wasn't vegan. So and we are good people. We're nice people. So you have to have we went at. I would say that I was ignorant. I didn't know until Earthlings. You say, people know. I didn't know.
Yeah, but it wasn't as if, I was a vegan and I was trying to make you become a vegan. You sort of led the way or tipped us over. Yeah, so, of course. That's what I'm saying. I myself was unforgivably ignorant. And I was actually worse, because I had been a vegetarian for a long time. So probably I'd gone a bit, I'm doing my bit. So I'd stopped sort of looking, I'd stopped researching, I'd stopped making an effort, because I thought, I am contributing as little as possible. That might be one of the reasons I'd sort of switched off my moral antennae a little bit for decades. So of course, but I think that spreading the message to people like me who for all my 40s,
exactly.
I was mainly a vegetarian, but I had years of eating animals and fish, and then I kept sort of, as I say, flirting with it and gumming back. I was flip flopping.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean,
Well, I was talking to a 50-year-old man whose daughter is vegan, and has had a few conversations with her, but she's not. I don't think she has tried to convince him to go vegan, because he was very freaked out by what he was seeing, and he was obviously very moved by what he was seeing. And he's like, I never knew about any of this for all these years. I can't believe how ignorant I've been.
And that's quite strange, isn't it? To say you couldn't, you would have thought that the thing that the food that comes on your plate, which is bloody or is clearly from an animal, that no cruelty was involved. It shows how humans can easily lock down things they don't want to hear.
They don't look, very rarely, maybe on Christmas when you have a turkey, it doesn't look like the animal. It's like bits of like ham and chicken slices. You could easily trick yourself into thinking this is food. You see pork, steak. These aren't animals. These are food. I mean, I know we call chicken, but even the word chicken has just become food. It looks the sound of it. We see it as food. Word. Chicken.
My very wealthy publisher once took me to the Ivy in central London, and was, everything is expensive there. And he ordered, I don't know, Dover sole or something, and it came out, and he was like, "What?" He just turned around to the waiter and started complaining about the little streaky bits. What's all this? What's all these streaky bits in here? What's going on? I don't want that. I want it to look. Why? What's it all streaky? What's the red brown bits? And the waiter patiently explains, well, it's a fish, you see, and those are the blood vessels that. Well, I don't want it. I don't want to see that. I'm not going to eat that. Take it away. And like 19, 20 pound, more than that, 25 pound dish, and he refused to eat it because there was any evidence that this fish had once been a living creature. So it actually probably died in vain. So they probably just went away and tossed that in the bin. But it's just a 70-year-old man like found it hard to accept that any death had been involved, or any cruelty, or any unpleasantness to get his food on the table. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's really disturbing the detachment from what we're eating. I think the biggest, when I'm talking to people, I am always referring to pigs, cows, chickens. Do you eat chickens? Do you eat pigs? Do you eat cows? Because people don't really think in that language. They think of it as food stuff. But the idea with activism is to try to get them to realize they're animals. That's almost the first step. Just realize what you're eating are animals. They've died. They've been killed. They have been killed for you, for your food. That's the biggest, it's so simple. It seems like, okay, that's so obvious, but people don't make that connection or understand that. It really feels like you're having to explain really basic things, because all of our lives we've been brainwashed to believe in this complete myth about how the world works, that, animals, they just kind of end up as our food. Or that,
well, it's in the Bible, isn't it? That, every bird in the sky, every beast in the field is there to serve you. I think it's in Genesis, isn't it?
It's the most disturbing thing when I hear people say, that they're here for us to eat. The chickens are here for us to eat. The cows are here what else are they here for? It's like, well,
they are bred for us to eat them. It doesn't mean that makes it right, does it? I mean,
you could say, this black person is here to be my slave. That's the purpose of this black person. Yeah. You can use that argument.
If this African person wasn't my slave, you'd never get to, when you come to my cotton farm, you'd never get to see a black person sort of being whipped and having a shite life. It's the same argument. And that black person, that African person who's our slave, has children. Therefore, look how cute they are. It's none of it makes any sense. But not one part of it makes any sense.
The one thing I'm having to try to grapple with is being friends with non-vegans. How far do you push them to try to go vegan? When do you stop? And how friendly can you be with someone who is harming animals?
Well, there's that. What's the? You will remind me.
Dystopia.
Well, no. Well, is that? But the vegans that won't even eat with people.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what the name of that is, but basically, this is like a subset of vegans who don't eat with people who are eating animal products because they don't want to normalize eat. They don't want to sit and kind of be around people who are eating. And in the same way as if I was against slavery, I wouldn't want to go eat with people who have their slaves, coming along and
And people would think you're mad. I mean, I think it's perfectly understandable. I don't go that far, but then I'm just idle. But I think that would be perfectly understandable. And I think one of the things that I've noticed about being a vegan is it's not even it's a psychological barrier. And I think we talked about dystopia, which was that phrase coined by
Claire Mann, a psychologist.
Claire Mann, who's a vegan psychologist and an activist. And I think that really resonated with me because I feel that it's not in terms of being with people physically. It's just in terms of you're in 1% of the population and there's a barrier between you and the 99%. And I feel that when we started this podcast talking about how hated vegans are, and it's not even the feeling hated, it's just the feeling of, oh God, I've moved into a section of society where by very definition, I think that 99% of you are either ignorant or cruel. So that means that I'm going to come over as self-righteous and morally superior and all the rest of it, which is one of the reasons it sort of feeds in. That's why people don't like vegans, because they feel that they're morally feel morally superior. But I guess to some extent, you do feel slightly morally superior because you feel I've stopped doing something that is morally repugnant.
Well, in the same way as I am morally superior to someone who has killed their wife, because I'm not killing humans, am I? So obviously, in the same sense as I'm not buying pigs, cows, or chickens, that I am morally superior in that regard.
Well, yeah. So, or if we buy into the Robert Sapolsky thing that we've talked about before, that none of us have free will. But whether you
just casually put that in there,
whether you can make we have no right to be morally. His point is you have no right to be morally superior to anybody because we're only who we are through a fortuitous mix of biology and what our parents were like, basically. So, but ultimately, you can still, the fact that you can choose whether you're going to harm animals or not, it may be predetermined by your biology and your upbringing, but there's still a way of other people trying to fan that flame of awareness about whether you want to live your life being cruel or not. I mean, I remember when I first got into reading about Buddhism and Eastern philosophy, there was I can't remember who said, there's a guy, if you eat animals, think over a whole lifetime. Think of them. Imagine yourself sitting on a mound of dead animal carcasses, and even if you only eat a sausage, that counts as one pig. And even if you only have a fish finger, that's one whole cod. And then if you get to be 80, think about the huge amount of carnage that your existence has created. Of your little person as an old man sitting on an enormous amount of dead animals. And I remember that sort of resonated with me. Do I want to live my life?
What do you want to leave behind when you die?
Yeah, of course, we cause destruction by the very fact that we're here. We can't help that. The best way to not cause destruction is to sort of bail out. But let's not all commit suicide because we're human beings. But you surely want to leave as little damage and destruction behind you as possible, as a baseline thing. We don't need any more angry, destructive, anxious people. We need peaceful, kind, calm people. And for me, being a vegan has to be part and parcel of that. Otherwise, your words are hollow and empty.
That's what's a real struggle with people I admire, like Eckhart Tolle. We're gonna throw him under the bus.
Did we throw him under the bus in a previous podcast?
Maybe. Yeah, the fact that he isn't vegan.
Well, he hasn't made the connection yet that it's food, and he talks about sentient beings the whole time. In practice, the sentence he says is,
he mentions factory farms in New Earth.
Yeah, well, he probably has organic meat and thinks that's all right. So yeah, but not there ain't such thing as a perfect person, is there? You have to take little bits of the people you admire and make your own amalgam of a composite person who does all the right things.
So there are kind of like two strategies if you're a vegan to not go insane. Basically, well, there's one strategy. Yeah, there's a strategy. If you don't want to go insane, you just pretend you're not a vegan, but you just be vegan, but you just kind of like it's not rather. I can just be friends with people, and they can, eat meat and dairy and eggs. I can have a girlfriend.
I'm not going to get agitated.
I'm not going to get agitated. That's just what I am, and it's not harming me. I don't feel it psychologically.
Well, we know someone who's one of those.
Yeah, it's a bit of a suppression of.
But it makes life easier.
It makes life much easier. But there's a part of me that wants more genuine relationships. So, if I want to be honest and say, look, I'm finding it hard to be friends with you because you abuse animals. You pay for animal abuse.
Well, yeah, well, your life's going to be
that's going to be
100 times harder than...
That's why the best, if you want to make friends as a vegan, join your vegan activism groups. That's, those are not just vegans. They are vegans who are actually doing something, because being a vegan is the least you can do, because being a vegan is just not doing.
Yeah.
It's as simple as, just not, you're like a bystander.
You're neutralizing yourself from committing wanton cruelty.
So if you see someone being bullied or someone being attacked, you're not doing the attacking, but you could go and do something about it.
Or you
could walk past. That, I guess that is better than attacking, but you're still not. You're not. It's a non-doing.
Yeah, I feel I feel at the moment I'm walking past. Well, at the moment I'm supporting vegan activism, so I'm giving money to people to go and stop the woman being beaten up in the street, but I'm not
on the ground.
I'm not wrestling the guy to the ground, which is probably pathetic of me.
I do feel like we need every single vegan who's vegan for ethical reasons, who's actually vegan, not plant-based, because plant-based is just diets. But if you actually are vegan, every single vegan needs to do activism, because it was a shame. It was only like 15 people on Saturday, and this is Edinburgh and Glasgow, vegan activists, 15 people. That's ridiculous. Two massive cities.
You weren't thinking it was going to be...
I was thinking it was going to be hundreds.
It's going to be a big marquee. And
it's like there must be lots of vegans in Edinburgh and Glasgow that are just not active. And it's really upsetting,
It's maybe because they don't want to get abused.
That's why the vegan who just wants to get by and have an easy life does harm to the movement, I feel, because
so you're making yourself in a very small minority, even now a smaller minority within the vegan community. Oh my god! And then, that is a bit.
Well, no, I feel because
you don't want to bring down any more barriers,
because there are so few vegans that we need everyone to be speaking out and not keeping it on a low profile. Because we can't think of ourselves in this situation. We need to think about the animals. Always be putting ourselves in the animals' position. Would they want us to just go about our lives as normal, but just not harming them?
It's a very, 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 very noble cause, which I will support until my dying day. But unfortunately, I do, maybe because of my age, I do feel it's, pissing in the wind to hope we're ever going to stop it. Mind you, having said that, slavery was abolished, but. So who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong, but maybe that's why a lot of people don't come.
Well, because they don't have that perspective of like, over time this will get better and better. I mean, we might all just die from climate change, or climate catastrophe, or war before that point. But
the point is it's contributing to the climate change more than practically anything else.
So many people say, "Oh, how can I make a difference?" Or one person said, "There's already quite a few vegans. I don't feel the need to be a part of that." And I'm like, if every person thought that, there would be no vegans. It's just a joke.
Oh, so he carried on not being a vegan because he thought there was loads
because there's already people doing it or being vegan already. So he's like, I don't need to.
That's probably one of the craziest things I've ever heard.
And another person said, "Yeah, if I don't know about it, if I'm not thinking about it, then I think I might be okay just continuing to..."
That's, again, going back to the analogy, that's like saying, well, there's plenty of people out there who don't beat their wives up. So I'm going to just carry on beating my wife up because there's loads of people that aren't doing it.
There's a movement going on. I don't need to be part of it. It's already happening.
Shrug it off. Yeah, it's
It's
all
a joke.
It's the sort of mass cognitive dissonance. The more you go into it, the more it's terrifying.
Well,
Really.
there's a passage in the Brothers Karamazov about this guy who is really having a bit of an ethical, philosophical dilemma. This guy who says, "I love mankind, but I really just hate men, hate people. So when I'm in a room with someone, I can't stand it. I can't stand this person. But I really want to love mankind, and I do love mankind, but I just find it hard to like individual people."
I've felt that rather a lot of my life. It's you know, like if you're kind of termed a misanthrope, and a misanthrope actually is like in Moliere's famous play. He loves humans. He's just so disappointed in the way we're going and the way we turned out. And so the idea of us as a species, he absolutely loves it. But every time he meets an individual human, he just gets disappointed by how shallow they are or how unethical they are, or and it's in the end you end up sort of isolating yourself. And I think it's one has to guard against. You really have to guard against, because you can calcify and become bitter. There's one thing with withdrawing, but withdrawing can sort of turn you in on yourself and make you give up.
That's why I think doing activism is empowering, because you do talk to people who do make you feel excited about humans. The humans have the potential to change when you do talk to that handful of people. Like I think I got 3 people out of 20 something to go vegan, although I don't know if they will go vegan, but it seemed quite genuine that they would.
Well, even if you manage to make them feel sort of guilty and think again while they're carrying on with their carnivorous lifestyle, then you've planted a seed which hopefully will germinate, in their own time, or encourage them to read something or watch. The 3 documentaries that did it for me were Earthlings, What the Health, and Cowspiracy. So one is about obviously your personal health. The second one is about the cruelty to animals, and the other one is about the environmental impact. So they're like it's a 3-pronged documentary attack that you cannot watch those 3 documentaries, get to the end of every one of them, and if you remain unchanged at the end of that, then
well, that's the thing.
There's no hope.
Because I watched Cowspiracy and still ate dairy and eggs, and then I watched,
because it's an intellectual. It's
like, I understand it's right, but it's not really. It wasn't really getting to my heart. Ethics.
It didn't make you cry.
Ethics, yeah. When I really felt completely moved by the ethics of it, then that's what changed.
I think people change their perception when they're made to cry, or they're shocked, or as a playwright, I guess I try to. I'm not trying to change. I'm not trying to make people better, because I've got a long way to go myself. But you're only going to really have an impact if somebody has come out of watching one of my plays slightly different from when they went in, either by being moved or upset or made angry, even, or, being offended even. It's the same thing, offending people.
The courage to be disliked.
Earthlings, that thing is incredibly offensive.
Yeah.
If you like eating animals, it's going to offend you every single moment of the 90 minutes or however long it is. It's totally it's
pointing the finger at you, and it's saying what you're doing is wrong. Change.
And I love that. I like to see the great art, great TV, great theatre. Is you as an audience member is not going to watch other people struggling with their dilemmas. It's pointing a finger and saying, you're part of this. Are you not part of this yourself? Go home and think if you're not contributing to this shit show that we're all living in.
I also think that's the greatest blessing of the internet and film and TV, is that these images and videos, you can't avoid them. They're everywhere. They might pop up on your social media feed. You'll find something. Maybe before it was like a little television broadcast, but now it's everywhere on the internet. This footage on YouTube and stuff. So it does make me feel like you surely do know about this. If you've got technology, you'll have seen something about animals, pop up somewhere.
But then you're making that, like we touched on earlier, you're making the conscious choice not to engage and not to take it on board. And like we were saying, then it is difficult. It's difficult to have. That's why it's a bit isolating, because it's difficult to respect people, and it's easy for me because I'm an old fart, so I live my life in relative. I'm quite solitary, so I'm not in a big social situation. But you starting out in life, needing to make connections, it's much more difficult because you're already morally filtering out people just by the very fact that you want everyone to think about these issues.
And that was what was hard at university, because that was really a big block to me making friends with my flatmates, was the fact that, especially early on, one of them made a joke about it. It was like, oh, is saliva vegan? In the sense of kissing someone.
Yeah, but you're all in a shared flat and they're all eating
milk,
chickens.
Meat.
And
that's the biggest. But the jokes about it, and then when you go into the kitchen and they're all cooking and eating, talking about meat, talking about cakes and eating cakes, and it really, really is hard to make friends with people like that.
I think you're in the friend making stage of life. I went vegan when I was already, I had kids and married, and I'm already, I'm not. It didn't make a great difference to me socially, but for you guys who are younger, I think it is.
Unless you take the easy route and just be a people pleaser.
Yeah, I mean you've got to be true to yourself. To thine own self be true. So you've got to carry on being true to yourself, and eventually you'll find people that are similar to you, and we can build a happy vegan utopia, a commune of plant-eating hippie types.
Yes. Well, that's going to be the vegan campouts, which is what I'll be going to in August. So that's where any vegans who are feeling isolated, maybe their whole family's non-vegan or friends and everything.
Yeah, it could be worse for you, couldn't it? Remember, if at least your whole family's vegan.
I know that's one of, when I say that to people, they're like, "Oh my god, I wish that so much." I'm always having conversations with my parents. The idea of having to keep fighting my parents just sounds awful.
You'd be eating in a different room by now, wouldn't you?
If you guys weren't vegan,
you'd have moved out probably.
I'd have just, I don't know. So I can't even imagine. It would be very, very hard to continue relationships. So I'm quite hardline vegan, it seems, from this conversation.
I have to be a vegan, otherwise I lose my son. Basically, I'd never see you again.
Well,
so that threat's hanging over me. If ever I lick my lips and feel like having cheese and wine again, I have to bear in mind that will be the end of my relationship with you.
Well,
good Lord.
Let's wrap this conversation up with a few recommendations to people who aren't vegan, who are maybe a little bit offended or a little bit confused, who want to look into this more. So I think Earthlings is really good, even though it's a bit old. The footage isn't as recent. So
I would challenge anybody to watch. Is it narrated by Joaquin Phoenix?
Well, yeah, Joaquin Phoenix.
I think produced by him. I would challenge anybody, if you want some impetus to go over the last little hurdle towards veganism, watch that, and you'll be a vegan at the end of it.
And if you're a British person, you say, "Oh, well, that doesn't happen here." Watch Land of Hope and Glory, which was made in a direct response to that excuse.
Yeah. Oh yes, that's the American animal industry. Ours isn't as bad, and then Land of Hope and Glory disabuses you of that.
And I actually felt it was even more graphic than Earthlings.
Yeah,
there's something about I couldn't get through it.
And I would, if you're worried about the health aspect, I would look at Alan Goldhamer. He's Dr. Alan.
The Pleasure Trap.
The Pleasure Trap, because that's not just about veganism. That's about salt, oil, and sugar intake. And I think he's been a vegan without salt, oil, and sugar. Doesn't drink for about
clean.
He's about 70, but he looks about 10. I mean, never seen any. But The Pleasure Trap is a great book because it sort of links all of it in. How the food industry is just robbing you of your health while stealing all your money.
It's very readable and it's very understandable and good.
And then What the Health? I think Goldhamer features.
He stars in that.
He features on
that. And then How Not to Die by Michael Greger and nutritionalfacts.org, which has the most.
Will all these be in the description below?
Yes, all be in the description. And for environment, Cowspiracy. And Seaspiracy, because Earthlings, Land of Hope and Glory don't touch on fish, so Seaspiracy is a great wake-up call on the fish side of things.
And if you're in any doubt about how intelligent our underwater friends are, watch that documentary, My Octopus Teacher, which I think is on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not about eating animals. It's just about shows you how incredible these animals are.
And even if all non-human animals were extremely dumb, you still have an ethical moral obligation to not harm them.
Even if they showed no love or affection, which makes them seem more worthy
even if
of
they're all
saving.
ugly, even though all ugly,
Scorpions,
all very ugly,
bitey,
not very nice to human,
wasps.
bitey, waspy, unintelligent. It would still have an ethical obligation not to harm
My
them.
my attitude to wasps has changed. You know, like I was a wasp in the room in my bedroom. You know, and it's just, you know, no one likes wasps. I mean, there must be some kind of who study them, but really, they're no one likes them. But just felt so much better just making the effort of opening the window and guiding it out with a newspaper rather than just, which I might have done before, whack it with a, which I would have done. 20 years ago, I would have whacked it.
One memory that sticks in my mind is we're all like sitting around this picnic table and a wasp came
something
along.
terrible I did.
A wasp came along and you just got a glass and you just kind of put it on and it suffocated, and it just kind of like. And I remember just the kind of like coldness of it, of you doing it. I was like, oh yeah, I get it's a wasp, and I get that we aren't supposed to like wasps because you just kind of like some animals you're not supposed to like.
But maybe I just put the cup over it and then it flew away later.
No, you killed it.
What a horrible man.
And I was like a little bit like, is this right? This doesn't feel right.
I only killed it in order to show you how cruel it was and how to not be like me. It was a lesson.
So yeah, thanks for watching this slightly provocative episode about veganism.
Feel free to pour abuse on our self-righteous asses
as
in
we
the comments below.
As we said at the beginning, vegans are one of the most hated groups, so it's very expected.
It's going to lose you quite a few subscribers.
Yeah, but I wanted to show this part of myself because I remember I got an email actually, someone saying, "Oh, I wanted to go and watch your vegan videos, but they're not there anymore. And I see that you're doing quite well with your other videos. And I'm quite sad that you're not doing that stuff anymore. I'd like to see those." And I kind of felt a twinge of like guilt that I've kind of neglected to talk about animals on my channel. But the thing is, I don't want my channel to be about everything and anything. Veganism, philosophy, stoicism, it kind of has to have a bit of a niche. But anyway, I don't know. Thanks for listening and watching, and see you next time. Bye. You gonna say bye?
Goodbye.
Okay.
That was a long one.